What's going on, everyone? This is Kevin here, coming at you with OnePlus Nord N30 5G pros and cons. So without further ado, let's get started. Now there's a lot of things to like about the OnePlus Nord N30 5G. This phone is an excellent value, especially considering that it is an affordable 5G device. Now along with that, there are of course going to be compromises. You're not going to get everything here because this phone isn't necessarily meant to be a flagship phone. Now in this video, I want to go over my top 5 favorite features, but then also 5 things where I think there is some room for improvement. But starting off with my top 5 favorite things related to this phone, coming in at number 1 is the display. Now with the OnePlus Nord N30 5G, we have a very large 6.72 inch display. Now you can see, it's very tough to even reach the whole display with just one hand. Now thankfully there is a fix to that, which is one-handed mode, which gives you a lot more accessibility here, and I have gone over that feature in my tips and tricks video for this device. But getting back to the main topic, we have a very large display here, which is great for content consumption especially. So if you want to watch videos on this device, you're getting a very large canvas to view that content. Now in addition to that, the display itself is IPS LCD and does feature a 120Hz refresh rate. So a very smooth, premium refresh rate here with the phone. And I remember it really wasn't too long ago that to get a phone with a 120Hz refresh rate, you'd be having to pay close to $1,000. So it's awesome to see that that technology and that feature specifically has now made its way over to phones in a much more affordable segment. So this phone overall just looks and feels a lot more premium and higher end than it actually is. Now to make things even better with the display, it is 1080p, we're getting a PPI of 391, a 20:9 aspect ratio, so a more narrow but taller form factor, and a 91.4% screen-to-body ratio. Another great thing too is that we do have a hole punch for the 16 megapixel front-facing camera. So if you're looking for a smartphone that's not too expensive, but at the same time gives you a really awesome display that's great for watching video content, looking at photos, going on social media, all those various things, then the Nord N30 5G might be worth considering. Now moving on to the second thing I want to highlight here with this device, and that is that we are getting a 3.5mm headphone jack. Now at this point in 2023, we're seeing less and less devices featuring the traditional headphone jack, and the main reason why we don't really see headphone jacks too much anymore is because Bluetooth headphones are very popular. So many people don't really need to plug in their traditional wired headphones because they're not actually using that type of headphone with their device, and instead they're going wireless. Now for me, I do prefer having the option. I still do have some really good premium wired headphones, and it is nice to use those directly with any device that is compatible with them. Now thankfully, even if this phone didn't have a headphone jack, I could still use an adapter, but there's really no downsides with having an actual headphone jack here. So I'm glad that it's there. I remember back with the iPhone 7, Apple was one of the first companies to remove the headphone jack, and at the time, a lot of people weren't a fan of that. And overall, I think this trend of getting rid of the headphone jack really hasn't been that popular amongst smartphone buyers. So good job OnePlus on still giving us the headphone jack. Now moving on to the third thing here with this device, and that is that we are getting stereo audio. Now if you're not familiar with what stereo audio is with a smartphone, basically what that means is that we're getting audio coming out of the main speaker on the bottom, but then also the earpiece. Now typically with more premium smartphones, like ones that are $500 or more, you do find stereo audio, but for a phone in this segment, that's not always a feature that is present, and thankfully we do have that here. Now with that, not only are you going to be getting clearer audio, but it's also going to be a lot louder too because you have multiple speakers that it's coming from. And then also when watching content, especially in landscape or even in vertical mode for that matter, it does sound a lot more immersive since audio is coming out of multiple sources. Got here for 3 nights over here at the Hyatt Regency, so really nice accommodation. So this phone has really excellent speakers. So again, the fact that they chose to go with stereo audio was a great decision, and it really does make a big difference. And you can see just from this example, this phone's excellent for watching video content, very immersive here in this large display, and everything looks really clear and good. Now moving on, another thing I really like about the OnePlus Nord N30 5G is how much storage we're getting here with the phone. Now with this device, we're getting 128 gigs of storage along with microSD card expansion. Now, just starting off with the internal storage part of it, 128 gigs is quite a bit, and I would say plenty for most people out there. It's very unlikely that you're going to find yourself filling up all that storage, and I suppose what you should do is see with your current device how much storage you're using, and then compare that to the capacity of this phone. So for example, if your current phone is only 64 gigs, but you find yourself only using 50 gigs of that, then you're gonna have a lot of extra space here with this device. But at the same time, that's good because as time goes on, it seems like apps get bigger and bigger. More people want to download content and media and download things for offline use, for example. So in all those situations, having a lot of storage is really nice. And of course, there's nothing worse than having your phone fill up completely. So 128 gigs for a phone in this segment is really good. Now, in addition to that, having micro SD card expansion is awesome because you can always offload photos and videos, for example, to free up some of that regular internal space. Now, there are many great things about the OnePlus Nord N30 5G, but the last thing I want to highlight here is that the fingerprint sensor is very fast and accurate. So the fingerprint sensor is mounted on the power button, and you can see it's very reliable. So those are my top 5 favorite things about the OnePlus Nord N30 5G, but let's go over 5 things that I think are things that they could maybe improve upon with the next generation. Now, starting off, there is no wireless charging with the OnePlus Nord N30 5G. Now, this might not be too much of a surprise to you because we typically don't find wireless charging with phones in this segment. However, there are some that do exist. So I do wish we had wireless charging because that is a feature that I do tend to use quite a bit with any device that does support it. I have wireless chargers all throughout my home. I have one in my kitchen, I have one on my nightstand, and another in my office. So they're very useful and it is convenient just being able to put the phone on that wireless charger and kind of forget about it. My second frustration with this device is that there is no ultra wide camera. Now, there are quite a few cameras that we're getting here, such as a 108 megapixel main camera, a 2 megapixel depth sensing camera for portrait mode, and a 2 megapixel macro camera, but I do wish that we did get an ultra wide camera. There are many situations where the ultra wide camera would come in handy, and being able to capture more of my surroundings in a single photo frame is especially convenient when I'm on vacation, for example. Maybe there's a large building that I want to get a photo of, or maybe a bunch of scenery surrounding me. Just having that ultra wide camera is a nice way to kind of change things up a little bit from the standard camera. And I do wish that we actually had an ultra wide instead of the macro camera, as I feel like that is a lot more useful. So while for many people not having an ultra wide camera is not a deal breaker necessarily, that's still something that I would like to see in the next generation of this device. Another thing that you should be aware of prior to getting this phone is the build materials. Now, the display is made of glass, but everything else here on the phone is made of plastic. Now, plastic is a bit more prone to getting scratched up as time goes on, so if you do end up getting this device, I do recommend pairing it up with some sort of case so that the phone stays in good condition for a longer period of time. Another thing I'm not really a big fan of with the materials here on the phone is the back panel being reflective. You can see that this phone is already covered with fingerprints, and that is something that's normal for pretty much any phone with a glossy back, but due to that reality, I prefer to have phones with frosted backs instead, so I do wish that it wasn't glossy like this. On the other hand though, if you are going to be putting a case on this phone, which I do recommend that you do since it is made of plastic, then you won't have to really worry about the back of the phone getting covered in fingerprints because there will be a case over it. Another thing I wish we had with the OnePlus Nord N30 5G is 4K video recording. Now in 2023, most people do have 4K TVs in their homes, and it would be great to be able to capture video in 4K and then play it back on the full resolution that our TVs are capable of showing videos at. Now, the display of this phone is 1080p, so in that regard, watching 4K videos on here is pretty pointless. But again, nowadays people do watch a lot of content on their TVs, of course, and especially if they have a smart TV, so it would have been great to have 4K video recording here with this device. And it's not necessarily unprecedented either to find 4K video recording with a phone in this segment. And then for the final thing I want to mention, I am a bit disappointed that this phone doesn't have the new Snapdragon 6 Gen 1 processor. Now with this device, we're getting the Qualcomm Snapdragon 695 5G processor, which kind of is a little bit of an older processor. In fact, the predecessor device to this phone, the Nord N20 5G, had the same processor, so it is a bit strange going from one generation to the next, getting the same processor as we previously had. Now, there are many improvements with this phone compared to its predecessor, which I'll be going over in a separate video, so definitely take a look at that. But I do wish that we had the latest 6 series Qualcomm chip instead of this same chip that we had previously. Fortunately though, performance from the processor that we're getting here is still pretty good, especially for a phone in this segment, so I do feel like we're still getting a really good value here. It's just that there is some room for improvement. Now, I did run a benchmark test using Geekbench 6, and here are the scores that I got. So again, these scores are not bad, especially for a phone in this segment. So overall, I still do think this phone is a great value when it comes to price to performance, but I would have preferred that newer chip. But what I recommend doing is running this benchmark test on your current phone and then compare your scores to these scores to get a better idea of how the Nord N30 compares. Now, finishing off the video, there are a few other things I did want to recognize here with the phone that I couldn't fit into my top 5 favorite things. There really are a lot of great features about this device, but I do appreciate that we're also getting NFC, so you can use this phone for tap and pay to make mobile contactless payments, and then also the fact that this phone has a very large 5,000 mAh internal battery, along with 50-watt Super VOOC fast charging is really cool as well. So in general, I think the OnePlus Nord N30 is a great value, and it is an excellent lower-end phone from OnePlus. So if you're not looking to spend too much money, but you still want a very capable smartphone, then I do think this phone is worth considering. But I hope you enjoyed my video on pros and cons for the OnePlus Nord N30. If you did, then give the video a thumbs up. But this is Kevin here, and I will see you in the next one.